Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into, well, a really core ethical idea. Do not judge others. It's ancient wisdom. You find it in sources like Matthew chapter 7.
Right. But this isn't just about reciting old rules.
No, definitely not. The sources we're digging into today are fascinating because they blend this moral teaching with some really unexpected modern ideas. Think Newtonian physics, even Pinocchio.
Exactly. Our mission here is to synthesize what these teachings are really getting at. We want to understand the mechanics of hypocrisy, why deep self-reflection is so critical, and maybe most surprisingly, how the consequences of judging are presented almost like, well, laws of nature.
It's this wild mix of the spiritual and the almost scientific, framing judgment like a physical event. So let's dive in. The starting point is that direct warning, do not judge, or you too will be judged.
And it's presented as an immediate thing, not some far-off consequence, but something that kicks in right away, relationally speaking.
The first picture they use is the boomerang. Simple, visual, you throw it out, aiming at someone else. But it's design, it's physics. Means it's probably coming right back at you. It really emphasizes that the fallout is kind of self-inflicted.
That's the intuitive starting point, the boomerang. But then the teaching goes deeper, bringing in Newton's third law. You know, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Okay, action-reaction, I get that with physical objects, but how does that apply to judging someone? How is a harsh thought or word an action force?
Well, the act of judgment itself, the criticism, the evaluation, that's the initial action. And here's the key part.
Yeah.
The measure you use, the standard, the yardstick you apply to someone else, that sets the intensity of the force.
Oh, okay. So if I judge someone really harshly for something small, I've set the dial way up on that force.
Precisely. You've applied a high magnitude force. And Newton's law says an equal and opposite reactive force has to come back to the source, back to the judger.
But how does that reactive force actually show up? I mean, in real life, is it just people getting mad at you or something else?
It can be both, really.
Yeah.
Externally, yeah, it's often social backlash. People might push back, or they might just pull away, seeing you as overly critical, maybe untrustworthy.
Makes sense.
But internally, maybe the bigger impact is psychological. You basically set this maybe impossible standard. The moment you inevitably fall short, because we all do, you get hit by the very same measure you used on others. It's like this internal accountability feedback loop.
Wow, that reframes it completely. It's not divine punishment, it's causality. It works whether you believe in the original source text or not. You're kind of designing the rules you'll eventually be measured by.
Exactly. It puts the responsibility squarely back on you. If you know your judgment starts a reaction that will rebound, the logical thing is to be incredibly careful about the standards you apply in the first place.
Okay, if the consequences are so clear, the boomerang always comes back, the reaction force is equal and opposite. Why are we so, prone to doing it? Which I guess leads us straight into the whole blindness issue. The speck and the log metaphor.
Right, this is where we get into hypocrisy. The source uses that classic image. You can see this tiny little speck like a piece of sawdust in someone else's eye with perfect clarity. But you're completely oblivious to the giant log, this huge plank of wood sticking out of your own eye.
Yeah, the teaching even calls this speck spotting skill hyper-medical vision, which is just brilliantly sarcastic. It captures that intense, almost surgical focus on tiny external flaws while missing your own massive internal ones.
That's the core irony of hypocrisy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Super perceptive outwards, totally blind inwards.
And the sources point out this happens a lot in close relationships with your brother, as the text puts it, where we feel we have the right, or maybe even the duty, to point out those little flaws.
Yes, that closeness is crucial because it gives cover for the criticism. We often wrap it up nicely saying, oh, I'm just speaking the truth in love, or I'm only telling you this for your own good.
Right.
But the teaching really warns us to check that. Is it really for their good?
But hang on, isn't there a place for constructive feedback? I mean, sometimes people do need help seeing something. How do you tell the difference between genuine help and log-driven criticism?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the sources say it all comes down to the motive. If your underlying drive is truly selfless care for the other person, that's one thing. But is it actually hidden pride? Are you trying to feel superior? Are you trying to make yourself feel better by finding fault elsewhere? If that's the driver, then your help can become toxic.
So the motive shifts everything. What might look like help is actually harmful.
It absolutely does. And in those close relationships, if the criticism comes from that place of unacknowledged pride, your own log, it can easily turn into, like, verbal violence or emotional blackmail. The other person feels trapped. Maybe they can't really push back because of the relationship dynamic, even if they sense something's off about your critique.
So the moment our desire to fix someone else is really about our own unseen issue, our prejudice, our pride, our log, the advice itself becomes dangerous.
Definitely. That's why the crucial first step, before you even think about offering to remove someone else's speck, is this moment of, let's call it, radical self-suspicion. You have to pause and ask yourself, honestly, why do I really want to say this? Is it genuinely about them? Or is it about me needing to feel right or better? Is my own log driving this?
And it gets worse, because the log isn't just sitting there. The sources say it grows, it gets bigger over time, which makes the whole hypocrisy thing even more problematic.
Yeah, the log isn't static. And the material explores how this happens, how we feed its growth through self-deception. This is where that Pinocchio analogy comes in, which is just brilliant.
Ah, Pinocchio.
Right.
His nose grew when he lied.
Exactly. But the key psychological insight isn't just that it grew, it's that Pinocchio himself was often the last to know. He'd be completely oblivious, walking around with his giant nose, bumping into things, until it was painfully obvious to everyone else. That's the log.
We just get used to it, even as it's blocking our view. So what makes it grow? What are the mechanisms?
The teaching points to three main human tendencies. First one is neglect, just willfully ignoring the flaw, thinking, it's small, it's no big deal, I'll sort it out later.
And later never comes. That's how a speck becomes a twig, then a brand.
Then a log, exactly. The second factor is rationalization. This is where we actively work to make the wrong thing seem right. We build these complex excuses, justifications.
Twisting logic.
Pretty much. Arguing with reality until we convince ourselves we're okay. Like, if you're always late, you might say, well, I'm just not a morning person, or creative people operate on a different timeline, instead of just admitting it's irresponsible.
Got it. And the third?
Avoidance. This is simply running away from the mistake, refusing to face it. The whole out of sight, out of mind strategy, you just bury the log deeper, pretend it isn't there.
Like not checking your credit card bill because you know you overspent.
Perfect example. The debt doesn't vanish, it just grows bigger in the dark. Same with the log. Avoidance lets it fester and expand without you consciously dealing with it.
It's a downward spiral, isn't it? Neglect lets it start, rationalization protects it, avoidance helps it grow huge, and the end result is you're basically blind, which leads to potentially really dangerous actions, right?
That's the critical point.
Yeah.
The person who's blinded by their own massive log but is still really eager, really zealous about correcting everyone else's tiny specks. The sources call their state dangerous and foolish love, or dangerous kindness. The intent might feel kind to them, but the impact is potentially destructive.
That's heavy, dangerous kindness. Is there an example used to show how this blind leading the blind plays out?
Yeah, the teaching references the story of Adam and Eve. Eve was deceived. First, you could say she had the initial speck of clouded judgment.
Okay.
Then she offers the forbidden fruit to Adam, who actually knew the rule they were breaking. So their act of sharing, which might have felt cooperative or even kind in that moment, actually led to mutual disaster.
They basically enabled each other's failure.
Precisely. So, advice or help or even kindness offered by someone who is log blind is inherently flawed. It's coming from a distorted perspective. It risks leading the person they're trying to help into error or harm too, because the foundation, the advisor's perception and judgment, is compromised.
Wow. So the problem isn't just personal anymore, it actually damages relationships and maybe even communities. And this kind of person, the one constantly finding faults, driven by their own log. The material gives them a specific name, right? The log doctor.
The log doctor, yes. Or in the original context, it describes someone who, well, almost enjoys finding faults. They get a little kick of superiority from critiquing. They can't stand minor flaws in others. Yet they have zero self-awareness about their own enormous underlying issue, their own log.
They're basically stuck in permanent critique mode.
And the sad outcome, the teaching notes, is often isolation. People naturally pull away from constant criticism. They just withdraw, maybe without even explaining why.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the log doctor, being blind to their own role in this, doesn't see it that way. They often retreat into self-pity, thinking things like, well, people just aren't worth caring about, or nobody appreciates my honesty. They blame the world's flaws, never their own distorted vision.
They think the world is dark and broken, which perfectly sets up that final analogy you mentioned, the sunglasses one.
Exactly. This whole judgmental log vision is compared to someone walking around indoors wearing super dark sunglasses.
Right.
And they're bumping into furniture, complaining loudly, Why is it so dark in here? What's wrong with the lights? Someone fix the lights.
Meanwhile, everyone else sees just fine. The room's perfectly lit. The problem isn't the external light, it's the dark filter they are wearing and refusing to take off.
That's the core insight. The log, or the sunglasses in this analogy, represents our prejudices, our pride, our biases. These things act as a filter, distorting how we see reality. We end up blaming the world outside for the darkness that's actually coming from the filter we're looking through.
So the solution has to be internal. It's about self-healing first. Taking off the sunglasses, removing the log, before trying to fix the lighting or operate on someone else's eye. How do the sources define getting back to normal vision?
Normal vision is described as basically clear, objective, truthful self-awareness. It means making judgments based on reality, on truth, not distorted by your personal biases or ego needs.
And how do you get there?
It's not a one-time fix. It requires ongoing, intentional humility, a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. It means consciously pausing, checking your motives, maybe even seeking out honest, potentially painful feedback about your own character. It's the complete opposite of neglect, rationalization, and avoidance.
And this idea of humility is contrasted sharply with the log doctor mentality, right?
Yeah.
Using the Apostle Paul as an example.
Yes, exactly. Paul, who in his writings openly calls himself the chief of sinners, that kind of profound self-recognition, that deep awareness of one's own potential for major flaws, stands in stark contrast to the pride that fuels the log doctor.
If you truly see your own log as massive, you lose the standing and probably the desire to go poking around in someone else's tiny speck.
It naturally leads to more caution, more empathy, less judgment. It's the antidote.
Okay, this has been, well, a really illuminating deep dive. We've seen how judgment can act like a physical reaction, a boomerang effect governed by the standards we set. We've explored the blindness of hypocrisy, how our own logs can grow unnoticed, like Pinocchio's nose, making our attempts to help potentially dangerous. And we ended with the log doctor, viewing the world through dark sunglasses, mistaking their own filter for reality. The absolute core lesson seems to be the need for some pretty radical self-reflection.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the final thought for you, the listener. In our world today, which is just saturated with opinions, judgments flying everywhere, social media, work, even family conversations, how can you stay alert? How can you develop that specific self-awareness to check? Am I maybe subtly wearing those prejudiced sunglasses right now? Is there a log I've been neglecting that's already warping my view?
What's one concrete step, one specific pause or question you can intentionally build into your interactions starting today to cultivate a more objective, humble, and self-aware perspective before you engage with or judge the complex world and people around you?
Especially remembering that action-reaction principle, knowing the standard you apply will return. What measure will you choose? Definitely some food for thought as you navigate the week ahead.